Munson with Munson Music, and this is more kind of an episode on chord changes and how do I do chord changes and how do I use my left hand better to make chord changes. So we're going to start out with a really easy song actually, and just kind of look at a couple ways to kind of make things a little bit easier with chord changes. So we're going to start with Stand By Me, and actually this would work out as capo second fret for Stand By Me. We're going to start on a G major chord, and when we play G major, first finger is going to go to the A string second fret, second finger on the low E string on the third fret, and the third finger on the high E string on the third fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds a G major chord, and it sounds really happy. So when the night has come. But then we're going to be going to an E minor chord. And when you play E minor, first finger is going to actually stay on the A string on the second fret. And this is what we're going to be talking about as guide fingers with this progression. And then second finger is going to be going to the D string on the second fret. So when you strum all the strings with that, it sounds an E minor chord. But the main coolness there is that you don't have to really move your first finger very far. You maybe want to kind of slide it over just a hair to make room for the second finger. But the main thing is you got an anchor point to kind of hang on to in that first finger. And then from the E minor chord in the song, we go to a C major chord. When we play C major, first finger is going to go to the B string on the first fret, and second finger gets to stay. So he is a guide finger to the C chord. And then third finger is going to go to the A string on the third fret. And if you strum the A string to the high E string, that'll get your clearest sound with that, and that's called C major. So between the E minor and the C major, the second finger can kind of you can pretend he has a dot of blue, and he cannot move because he must stay in the same place to make my chord changes easier. And then from the C major, now this is where things get tricky. We go to a D major chord, and the way you play D major, we have to lift off everybody. And then first finger is going to go to the G string on the second fret. Second finger is going to go to the high E on the second fret. Third finger is going to go to the B string on the third fret. And we kind of strum just the A, G, B, and E. That sounds a D major chord. So this is where things get tricky in the progression. All of a sudden, all of your fingers have to move at the same time. And even though I'm teaching D major as first finger goes here, second finger goes here, third finger goes here, what you really want to do is be a master choreographer of the left hand and try and work it out so that all your fingers are actually going down at exactly the same time, which is tricky. And actually sometimes adding bass notes to a progression can save you time, because the bass note obviously normally happens first in progression. But so for the C major to the D major, your first finger's going to the G string while your second finger's going to the high E string, and your third finger's going to the B on the third fret, and there it is. So it's kind of a weird thing, because you want to actually try and work it out what kind of path, trajectory-wise, your fingers have to work. So randomly, what could be kind of a cool exercise for this is going, okay, well, first finger's got to go from here to here. And you could work just the first finger, kind of going from the B string on the first fret to the second fret on the G string. Now your second finger's job is to go from the D string on the second fret to the high E string on the second fret. So you may want to just kind of practice just that one idea of like, okay, second finger's got to go from here to here. And then third finger is going from the A string on the third fret to the B string on the third fret. So you may want to take just the third finger and kind of isolate just that one finger. And then you could even take the idea of kind of taking, well, I'm going from 1 and 2 here to 1 and 2 there. So using a two finger combination of like where you've got to go in the C chord to the D chord, or even a second and third finger idea where you're isolating that shape. And actually that's what's kind of cool, isn't it? Is you've got the A string on the third, second fret on the D string. That shape almost stays the same going to the D chord. So it's almost just moving just that shape and then laying in the first finger. So once you practice that, you may want to try just all three at the same time, trying to get everybody down at the same exact time. And then from the D major chord, we're going to be going back to the G major chord. Now this is another tricky part in the progression, because when you go from D major to the G major, everybody has to move. So you may want to do those same ideas we were just talking about. You take the G string second fret, and then you're going to the A string on the second fret. So he has to jump over the D and the G string, or the D string, to kind of go from G on the second to the A string on the second. Your second finger is going from the high E string to the low E string on the third. So you may want to isolate just that idea of moving the second finger. And your third finger is going from the B string on the third fret to the high E on the third fret. So you may want to isolate just that one finger just to kind of try that. And then you could take the first finger, second finger, and where they are in the D chord, and then try that to where they would be in the G chord. And then you could kind of take the same kind of idea with 2 and 3, and that's kind of a big stretch. So 2 and 3. So these, it is almost like little finger stretches for the left hand. Actually, these can be really good exercises just to kind of get your fingers used to. That's how far from that string to another string. And then eventually you build in all 3 fingers trying to go down at exactly the same amount of time. So that can be kind of tricky. And then through the song we have kind of the G major, E minor. Second finger is the guide to the C chord. Everybody's got to jump to the D chord. Everybody's got to jump to the G chord. So you might want to look out for your guide fingers. Right, so first finger gets to stay on the A string second when you go to the E minor chord. Second finger gets to stay on the D string second when you go to the C. Everybody's got to jump for the D. Everybody's got to jump for the G. So you may want to kind of play around with those ideas, actually, of looking for guide fingers in whatever chord progression you're looking at. Now, other chord progressions, though, will move around, and actually there's some other voicings for these chords, actually, that you can make this a little bit more interesting. For instance, on the G chord, instead of doing the regular G voicing, you could do first finger on the A string second finger on the low E string third, and take the third finger and go to the B string third, pinky on the high E third. And that's another way to voice your G major chord, actually, with your third and your fourth finger down. Now, for some students, this can feel weird because pinky's a weak finger, right? But sometimes having these fingers as kind of your guide fingers through the tune can be kind of cool too. So another way to play E minor would be leaving that third and fourth finger down and then kind of doing your first finger on the A string second fret, second finger on the D string second fret. That's called E minor 7. So now you have 3 and 4 kind of built in as guide fingers between the G and the E minor. So you really only have to move just your second finger from the low E string third to the second fret on the D string. So you can substitute those in for G's and E minor chords in just about any song you come across. And then on a C major chord, instead of playing regular C, you could play something called C major 9, where you do first finger on the D string second finger on the A string third, and if you strum the A string and the high E string, that gets your clearest sound with that. So basically 1 and 2 are switching places. so 1 and 2 is almost like a jump. So 1 and 2 from the A and D to 1 and 2 on the A, D and A. And then from there, you could even use something called D sus for your D chords. It doesn't sound quite as happy. It sounds slightly resolved. But it's, the way you play D sus, 3 and 4 can still stay on the B and the E string. First finger can go to the G string on the second fret, and that's called a D sus. So you could use that for your D chords too. So you got the G in the night, G has come, E minor, da 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 da, and the C major 9 is the D sus, slide will G. So you may want to kind of play around with using those chords too. It's like having built-in guide fingers too. But if you're doing a lot of tunes in G major, those can be cool voicings. Now, depending on how heavy your strings are, eventually that 3 and 4 is going to probably kind of start to hurt. And so you may want to, you don't want to play with hurtness. You want to find easy ways to get from chord to chord. Now, a couple tricks with the left hand too, with all of these chord changes, is the closer you get your finger to the right behind the fret, then the better sound that you get out of the sound, and actually, or out of the guitar, and the easier it is to play. So you want to try and get your finger not way back over near the first fret for a second fret note. You want to get it almost right on top of the second fret. And depending on the guitar, you can almost press down right on top of it, but eventually you get kind of a muted sound. So if you go just a hair behind the fret, that'll get you your clearest sound with it. Now, the other thing that a lot of people will run into is muted strings when they're trying to fret the guitar when they first start out. And a lot of that has to do with finger angle. It's always angle over effort with the guitar. You want to try and be as lazy as possible to get the best sound you possibly can with the least effort possible. And so a lot of times by thinking more fingertips, the very pad of the finger actually on the string, there are more nerve endings in the tip of the finger than anywhere else, and so you can feel better, and I know eventually you build up calluses, right, and that's supposed to be a big thing. If you're just starting out, go get really light strings, because it'll just make the biggest difference in the world with bar chords and everything. So the lighter the string, the better. If on an acoustic, I would recommend trying a silken steel, which almost feels like an electric guitar string. Or if you're playing electric, playing with 8s or 9s isn't a bad idea, actually, especially if you're just starting out, because you'll be able to play for longer. You'll be able to build up your finger muscles better, so that you can actually move into higher gauge strings for tone later on. So light strings can make a big difference too with your left hand. But the main thing is going to be angle. And there are a couple things you can do. Bringing your wrist more forward when you're playing can give you a better angle. Now sometimes this can feel strained. I know when I started playing guitar it was all about Metallica and they played with the extended, strained left hand idea. But if you kind of bring your wrist more forward, that can help. And angle, more than anything else actually, and thumb placement are the main two things with left hand in general, which completely applies to chord changes. So if you went to almost a classical guitar position, it would actually give you more forward rotation of your deltoids, your shoulders. And so you would be able to kind of bring your wrist more forward. It's more like a classical guitar position, but a strap can really help too. So if you have a guitar with a strap, I would definitely recommend trying to play with a strap and getting a higher head angle. And then the E minor and the C, you can take more fingertips from that angle because you can bring your wrist more forward of the guitar. And you might want to experiment, experimenting with extremes is not a bad idea because you'll find a place, that's comfortable for you. So you can try it further back or further down and then kind of raise it up until it starts to feel really good. You kind of try and find an angle where it really kind of makes the chord really sound really good on the guitar because you're thinking more fingertips. So fingertips is a good idea. Now the weird thing with the left hand too is in addition to angle, is you may want to play around with your thumb placement with the left hand. There's this great experiment actually, if you, I think it's a great experiment. If you take your left hand and you just kind of flatten it out and just kind of bring your thumb into the center, right? It's this huge difference between when you've got your thumb outside, right, and kind of moving 3 and 4 into the hand, or whether you've got your thumb nearer into the palm, with how much movement you have with 3 and 4. So with the third finger and the fourth finger, the ring finger and the index finger, the closer your thumb is to those fingers, the more movement actually you have with those fingers. And once you kind of put your thumb in, if you put it back out and try it, you can really feel the strain of the tendons from your thumb being outside of the hand. So the idea here is that if you can keep your thumb in some manner close to where 3 and 4 are, then that makes those fingers easier to play with. And so when you're in the chord, you may want to kind of play around with where your thumb is in the chord. So if you put your thumb more to your right in the chord, then that can make it a lot easier. So playing around with where the thumb is in the chord can make a big difference with how much fingertips and how much control you have with those particular fingers too. So that can make a big difference. So you may want to experiment with where your thumb is. And this actually plays in really, really big with other chord progressions, especially when you're dealing with bars. However, another chord progression that might be kind of cool to work with a lot of common chords would be Hey Joe, for instance. And it starts on the C major chord. And then we do a G major chord, so everybody has to move. And then we go to a D major chord, so everybody has to move. And then we go to an A major chord. When we play A major, first finger goes to the D string on the second fret, second finger goes to the G string on the second fret, third finger goes to the B string on the second fret. And if you strum all the strings with that sounds like A major chord, and it's a big party on the second fret. So with this chord in particular, actually everybody's kind of crammed in. So you may want to kind of play around with your wrist going more to your left or closer to the head, so that you can kind of get all those fingers in. And head angle will make a big difference in this too, but in kind of a slightly different way, depending on how you're fingering the major. But you may want to experiment with that. And then from the A major, we'd be going to an E major chord in Hey Joe. So you have first finger on the G string on the second fret, or first fret, second finger on the A string second fret, and third finger on the D string on the second fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds like E major chord, and it sounds really, really happy. So if we're looking for ways to make that chord progression easier, right, we got C, G, D, A, E, E, da, 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 E. A lot with this particular chord progression, everybody's got to move. So you may want to take that as kind of an opportunity to work that idea that we were working from the G to the D. And the C to the G actually is kind of an interesting example too. So you've got the 1, 2, and the 3 on the C chord. You could even isolate the fingers like we were doing with the other chords. You could take 1 from the B string first fret to the A string second, so you could kind of train that finger. Then you could take 2 and kind of move it from the D string second to the low E string third. Then you take third finger on the A string and kind of get used to moving him to the high E string. Then you could try the 2 finger combinations of doing 1 and 2, making that move from the chord. You could try 2 and 3, doing that movement in the chord, which that's an interesting stretch. And then eventually you kind of move all 3 to work it into from the C chord to the G chord. And then And same idea from the G to the D, and we kind of talked about that with Stand By Me. Now from the D to the A major, actually, this is kind of a cool example of a guide finger that's not in exactly the same place. Because your third finger in the D chord is only going back 1 fret to the B string 2nd fret, and then you can lay in 1 and 2. So you can work guide fingers from slides. So if you're on the D, and then you're going to the A, you could kind of think 3rd finger slide back to 2nd fret, and then put down 1 and 2. so that might be kind of a cool thing. You can also work the isolation technique, right, where we kind of take 1st finger, and he's going from the G string 2nd to the D string 2nd. 2nd finger is going from the high E 2nd to the G string 2nd. And then 3rd finger is going from the B string 3rd to the B string 2nd. So he's the one that's common. And then you could work the 2 finger combinations of where those fingers would go. 1 and 2 from the D to the A. 2 and 3 from the D to the A. And that's an interesting change because you're working the slide there with 2 just kind of jumping around. That's a cool exercise. And then from there you could go from the D to the A, working your slide there. Kind of trying to keep 3 on the B string. So you may want to kind of experiment with that. So same techniques, different chords, right? Now from the A major to the E major, everybody's moving, but what's kind of cool is the 2nd finger and the 3rd finger can hold the same shape. So this is almost like an idea of a guide finger as a shape, or a guide shape. So you've got 2 and 3 going from the G and the B string 2nd fret to the A string and the D string 2nd fret. So they're kind of jumping over strings, but kind of working that. So it's almost like a little gymnastic thing. So you could take the 1st finger and work where he's going from the D string 2nd to the G string 1st. And then you could take 2nd finger and working from the G string to the A string. And then you could take 3rd finger and working from the B string to the D string. And then after that, then you could work the 2 finger combinations of the D and G going to the G and the A. Actually, that's kind of cool because it's like an A sus2 chord going to an E7 chord. Just those 2 fingers, actually, and those are completely substitutable for these chords, actually, in a really cool drummy way. And then you could work the 2 and the 3 as kind of an isolation, right? So now you almost got like kind of a D major 9. We're going to kind of go into an E minor chord. So it's kind of cool, actually. I mean, doing down strums on those, you can end up with some interesting chord changes. Might end up writing a song doing something that might end up getting inspired. So then you got the A major going to the E major, which has the change. So it's just a couple things you could kind of work for. And then from the E major chord, we're going back to the C chord. So we could even kind of isolate that the same way. We could take the 1st finger and work from the G string 1st to the B strings 1st. We could take the 2nd finger from the A string 2nd to the D string 2nd. And then 3rd finger is going from the D string 2nd to the A string 3rd. So you could isolate those fingers. You could take 1 and 2 and then work those as kind of a combination into the chord, which is kind of cool. So where he's in the E major chord to where he's in the C major chord, and you've actually kind of got almost that same shape with 1 and 2. So it's another kind of shape guide idea from the E major to the C major. And then you've got 3rd finger that you could kind of add in to get that E major change to the C major. So working individual fingers, working finger combinations, looking for guides, between strings or in shapes from chord to chord can actually really, really help your technique a lot. Now, a really interesting question though is like when you've got bar chord shapes, and a good example of this actually would be Hotel California, randomly. I love California. And Hotel California, if you're playing it without the capo, starts on a B minor chord. And the way you play B minor, 1st finger goes across the entire 2nd fret. 2nd finger goes to the B string on the 3rd fret. 3rd finger goes to the D on the 4th fret. And the pinky goes to the G string on the 4th fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds a B minor chord. But what can happen when you're doing a bar chord is you can end up not putting down enough pressure. So you end up with kind of a muted sound. One way to kind of work into the bar would be to take in the 1st finger. And you can even work like a 2-string bar, or a 3-string bar, or a 4-string bar on the guitar and kind of work up the shape. Now there are a couple things that really play into this too to make it easier. The angle thing can definitely give you a better handle on bar chords. So definitely raising up the head can make it easier. Lighter gauge strings can help. Using a strap can help. A couple things with thumb placement is a lot of times you think your thumb has to go right behind the index finger and you just have to press down really hard, and that does work. But if you take your thumb and you go slightly to your right, what it does is it gives you a cool leverage with your right hand to twist the wrist to get the pressure of the index finger. So you're taking the idea of the thumb has to give you the pressure to the idea of the wrist, and the arm and the forearm can kind of give you the pressure. So that can make the hugest difference in how much pressure you can actually put on. It's one way is you're trying really hard and that works. The other way is you're using the angle of the thumb to kind of give you leverage against the bar. A couple other things you could kind of play around with too with bars is how much of the knuckle joint, because that's your biggest joint, is actually going over the top two strings in particular. So at some point it doesn't feel natural, but you may want to experiment with that. I know when I first started playing with the guitar, that was kind of a big thing for me. It was like, if I can get that joint there, or like I've got pudgy fingers and like the G string always goes in the crease or whatever, and so like if you offset the bar by millimeters, sometimes it can make the biggest difference in the world. Now in that particular shape from the B minor chord on Hotel California, we go to an F sharp major chord, which is a very, very good example of moving shapes as a whole. So we actually kind of take the 2, the 3, and the 4, which is kind of like a minor chord or E major chord shape, and we're going to be moving that to the G string, A string, and D strings. So you're actually just kind of shifting 2, 3, and 4. The bar is in exactly the same place. So the bar is actually technically a guide finger, and your 2, 3, and 4 is actually a guide shape, which is kind of cool. Now from there, though, we end up going to an A major chord. So it's a jump out of it, everybody moves. A major to E major, everybody moves. E major to G major, same change that we did in Hey Joe, to a D chord, same chord change we did in Stand By Me. And then we end up with kind of a D major chord shape to an E minor chord. So this is another everybody's got to move. So you might want to kind of, and same thing with the B minor, actually going to the F sharp major, going to the A major. You could even isolate the bar moving to the D, right, and kind of work that as an isolation thing. Or you could take second finger on the B or on the G string and kind of work where he's going to end up in the A chord. And actually that's cool because you end up with kind of a slide from the G string 3rd fret to the G string on the 2nd fret. So it's almost like kind of a slide thing. So bar moving in. Or you could do the 3rd finger on the A string 4th, and he's got to go all the way to the B string 2nd. So you could take that one finger idea and just kind of work it. So from the B minor to the F sharp major, we're kind of taking that 2, 3, and 4 shape, and we're just kind of moving that whole shape down one string, or up one string, depending on which way you're thinking about it. So the 2nd finger is kind of moving to the G string 2nd, or from the B string 3rd to the G string 3rd. The 3rd finger is moving from the D string 4th to the A string 4th. The pinky's moving from the G string 4th to the D string 4th. So you want to kind of experiment with kind of moving that shape. So that's kind of cool because we have a guide finger and the 1st finger not having to move, and the 2, 3, and 4 being a shape that moves. And again, just keep an eye out on where your thumb placement is for that, and you can keep an eye on your wrist pressure for that too. Like I said before, lighter strings definitely make that easier. And then from the F sharp in the song in Hotel California, we go to A major. So now that's a tricky part. You may want to kind of take the bar idea, going to the D string on the 2nd fret. It's kind of an isolation exercise. 2nd finger's got to go from the G string 3rd to the G string 2nd. So you actually have a guide finger and a slide on the G string. 3rd finger's got to go from the A string 4th to the B string 2nd. So that's your biggest jump. So you could isolate your fingers for that. You could kind of take your 1st finger, 2nd finger, and work that as a combination, working that slide idea with 2. And then you could take 2 and 3, which this can be kind of interesting too, and just isolate those 2. So you still got your slide to kind of practice those 2 fingers. And then from there, then you could work that whole change of the F sharp major to the A major. So that's a crazy little chord change right there, but very cool. And then from the A to the E, actually we already kind of talked about that in Hey Joe. And then from the E major to the G major chord, it's very, very similar to a lot of the other changes we could do. So we could take 1st finger and work it to the A string 2nd fret. So isolating that finger, 2nd finger is going from the A string 2nd to the low E 3rd, so you could isolate that. And then D string on the 2nd fret is going to the high E 3rd, so that's kind of an interesting jump. And then you could try the 2 finger isolation, and that's kind of cool because 1 and 2 actually as a shape almost stays the same between the E and the G major chord. And then you could try the 2 and 3 as kind of a shape from the E major, that's interesting too because you got kind of an E minor to almost a false G or something. And then you can try all 3 fingers to kind of work that whole change. And then from the G major in the song, we're going to the D major. So that's kind of a Stand By Me change we looked at. And then we got D major going to an E minor chord. So you may want to isolate that too, that G string second to the A string second. Second finger on the high E second to the D string second. Third finger from the B string third to nowhere. So you may want to practice that too, kind of working the D to the E minor. And then from the E minor, we'll be going to the F sharp major. So this is enough. So you've got kind of going back into the bar, second finger on the G string, third finger on the A string, fourth pinky on the D string. So that's kind of a weird change. So you may want to kind of work that first finger as kind of the A string second to the bar, and then you can kind of work the second finger, kind of working from the D string second to the G string third, and then you can kind of work that whole idea of kind of the E minor to the F sharp major. So you may want to kind of isolate each of those chord changes. And then the cool thing is the F sharp major to the B minor, we're just shifting that 2, 3, and 4 shape again. So we kind of got another guide finger there and kind of a guide shape to get back and forth. So all together you got the B minor on the dark desert, F sharp, A going in my E, and then G, warm spell of D, E minor, rising up through the F sharp. So you may want to kind of play around with that B minor, F sharp, A major, E major. So I think that would be another really good chord change progression to practice. And you can add strum patterns to that, or you know, work bass notes with those chords. You can go watch my videos on Hotel California or Hey Joe and kind of work those chord changes too. And the first progression we started with just as an aside, that G, E minor, C, and D is very, very popular progression. You'll find that in Last Kiss, Teardrops on My Guitar. There's a ton of different songs that actually kind of work that 1, 6, 4, 5 in the key of G major. But that's the basics of how you can make your chord changes a little bit easier and kind of isolate things in the left hand. Again, watch head angle, thumb placement, pressure, how you're putting it on with the wrist. Lighter gauge strings can help. Angle can help. Experiment. So that's the basics of how you can make your chord changes a little bit easier. So I hope that helps. So good luck!